Good morning, everybody of Spanish United. How are you? This is Jacob Ben Yosef. Today we have a very special guest to come on our show, which you kind of to introduce yourselves to the audience. I'm cueing you in, Rabbi.
Yes. Hi. My name is Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss of Neturei Karta Jews United Against Zionism.
Thank you so
Uh,
much for being on the show,
well,
Rabbi.
Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor. Thank you.
So, today's topic is going to be dealing on a couple of things. Like the first one is going to be dealing on Hispanic-Jewish relations. One of the topics is that Hispanics are a very large community that's growing everywhere. But I kind of feel that because of the politics that's going on today with Zionism, I have seen a lot of anti-Semitism within the Hispanic community, and I've also seen Hispanophobia within the Jewish community. So I feel that having these talks are important because when people know about each other, it prevents friction. So from your point of view, how do you feel Zionism contributes to anti-Semitism in the Hispanic community?
Yeah. So first, as always, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. It is. I would say that it's not only in the Spanish community, but unfortunately, around the world, the in every type of different society, every different community will find that people judge uh, people as not only as individuals, but usually from the ethnic group they come, the society they come, where they belong. Now, of course, we're not here to condone the vilification of people in any manner, shape, or form, or definitely not because they should be generalized. But unfortunately, um, it is a fact of life that people make generalizations. And in the case of um, the Jewish people uh, are equated with and combined with the concept of the state of Zionism and the loyalty to the state of Israel. And any actions that the state of Israel does is is attributed to the backing of the Jewish people around the world, and therefore people will consider the Jewish people responsible for whatever the state of Israel does. And their mindset, and in other words, how they relate to other people will think that that is the view and the feelings of the Jewish people. The Spanish Jewish people or the non-Spanish Jewish people, it would be the same as you're a Jew. You would therefore be held accountable, sort of, or responsible, or that you share the view of the Zionist state of Israel, because Zionism represents itself as the Jewish state. Their culmination in the creation of the Jewish state, they call it the state of Israel. They use the Star of David. They use the issue of the name Israel. Israel is Jacob in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole concept of it's one issue of Judaism, that the land belongs to us, God gave it to us, and anybody the Holy Land God gave to us, and therefore anybody who opposes our being there is simply because they are they are anti-Semitic. Now, that's just another tangent. I'm not going to really just going to touch on that, but of course, Arabs are Semites, from Shem, from Yishmael, and therefore, so there's something. But we're not going to play on semantics. The concept of anti-Semitism means anti-Judaism today. So they look at the people who do not accept the occupation of the Holy Land by the Zionists, or what they would have called the Jewish state. So they look at them as anti-Semites. It's because simply they do not accept another people. Now, all these ideas is what's generally held around the world, and all these ideas, unfortunately, contribute to a tremendous exacerbation of anti-Semitism, of hate, of a rift and a mistrust, certainly by the Muslim and Arab world, but in general around the world, people look on the side and they see it just like you would look at one nation, how they treat another people that are living amongst them. You would not accept if they treat their inhabitants inhumane, the citizens inhumane, if they're because they're a different religion. The same is how people will judge the Jewish people who are around the world, and certainly in the Holy Land, they judge them by what is happening to the Palestinian people. And so all of this is the facts. Now, is these facts acceptable? It is totally, it's a tragedy, and it is in truth a misnomer. It is totally wrong, because in essence, the whole concept of Zionism, the ideology behind the state of Israel, and the existence of the state of Israel, and the actions that emanate from the state of Israel, every part of the occupation of the Holy Land, is totally unacceptable according to Judaism. And it may make people's heads spin, because it sounds so crazy, so weird. That somebody should come along and say, like that when it's not day when the sun shines, that's basically the same thing. All of a sudden, after 73 years of the state of Israel and so many years of information that's been given to them through the mainstream sources of the information, and they've heard it's a Jewish state, and the more the religious the Jew, the more he's loyal and will support the state of Israel. And somebody's coming along, this rabbi gets up here and says that no, on the contrary, it's unacceptable according to Judaism and has nothing to do with our religion. But I, with God's help, I'm here just to present the view that I will show you clearly, with God's help, the view of Judaism, and the view that is shared by the vast majority of the very religious Jews around the world. And I'll first start with simply turning to in New York. I live in New York, and right, the very most concentrated religious communities. There is one in upstate New York, Monroe, New York, that's just totally a very with thousands and thousands tens of thousands live there in Kiryas Joel, New York, named after the Satmar Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. They moved there, let's say it's 50 years already, or a little less than 50 years, 40 years maybe. But they were mostly living in New York. They were living in mostly they were concentrated in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. That is right across from Manhattan. If anybody comes to New York, they visit Manhattan. Manhattan is an island that has bridges that connects it to Brooklyn. And one of the bridges is called the Williamsburg Bridge. You cross over the Williamsburg Bridge, and on the right side, you're right smack in the center of the very largest concentration of religious Jewish communities, and you'll right away see they're in a religious Jewish community, because you'll see the women dressing very modestly. You would think you're going back 100 years or more, at least, and men go with beards and payas, and it's a very, very religious community.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and so so this is, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. Now,
Not a problem.
This religious community is, like I say, very religious, and therefore they don't have even one Israeli flag flying in the whole community, you're talking about miles and miles of this religious community, there's not one single Israeli flag flying there. Now, according to the common conception, the common idea, you would believe that that if the more religious, the more loyal you are to the state of Israel. And yet you come to a community where there's not one single Israeli flag. And that you will find if you will go to the other religious areas, Montreal, Canada, you will go to in Stamford Hills in London, we're talking about where the very religious communities
Right.
live.
The
And same
Haredim.
thing, you will go to Mea Sha'arim, that's in Jerusalem. You will go, and again you will find that they do not fly the Israeli flag, and you'll speak to the people. They are anti the concept of the existence of the state of Israel. So let's understand why. Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years where we accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses took the Torah from God and gave it to the Jewish people. We made a covenant to uphold the Torah. That is what it means to be a Jew, that we are exacting in our acceptance, in our observing the Torah, to be subservient to the Almighty, keeping the laws of the Torah. Zionism is a political movement of a mere 100-odd years that was created by a group of people that were almost entirely non-religious, and they were people that were moved and had aspired to create a national home, to create a nationalism.
Yeah, Theodor
And
Herschel is the father of
Theodor
modern day
Herschel,
Zionism.
right? And so these people, they wanted to create a nationalism, and they called this Judaism. In other words, it's a transformation from subservience to God, from religion, to a base nationalist concept of having a state, of having an army, of having an Olympic team, and all the other issues that concern a physical state. Now, so this is it's an ersatz Judaism, a transformation from subservience to God, from religion to nationalism. Now, the concept actually flies in the face of Judaism, because we accepted to be subservient to God, to uphold His Torah. Now, they proudly announced their democracy, which is very questionable, their democracy. But anyway, but they consider themselves a democracy. They proudly announce you don't have to be religious. You don't have to. You could do what you want. They proudly make what is it called? Gay rights parades,
Right.
and all those things in the heart of Jerusalem. They anything. They're totally non-religious in its essence, and they say you don't have to be religious. So here they're making something called the Jewish state, where they're totally saying that you're free of the responsibility of being religious. Now, that's just the core issue, but it's more than that. The core issue flies in the face of Judaism, because the Almighty warned us that when we went out of Egypt, which was like 3,000 years ago, God took us out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And He gave us, if you're a Jew, in other words, we're going now with this train of thought that we're Jewish, we're following what Judaism is, a religion that you believe in God, you believe in the Torah, that Moses took the Torah from God, and it says in the Torah that God took us out of Egypt, and He required of us to go up to the Holy Land. But He stipulated that we must remain on a very high level of holiness, because it's a holy land. In other words, all over the world we have to serve God, but in this holy land is required to be on a very high level of spirituality. And if not, then just as a body rejects a foreign object, it's very sensitive, the land will reject us, God forbid. So the prophets warned us when we went in there. King David eventually, he had a son, King Solomon, who built the temple, and then there was a second temple. And when we had these temples, then the prophets warned us many times that we have to be careful we're not on that level required by the Almighty, to remain there, and we will be, God forbid, sent into exile. And that came about with the destruction of the temple around 2,000 years ago. So the temple was destroyed, and the Jews were dispersed amongst all the nations around the world. And when that happened, so we were put under oath by God, and this is in the prophecies of King Solomon. We were put under 3 oaths. One, that God warns us that we are not to attempt, and we should not return en masse in large numbers to the Holy Land, because God has driven us from the land. In other words, it was a decree of God that because of our lacking in this high spirituality, that we are dispersed, we lost that privilege of being a nation with a sovereignty in the Holy Land. So now we are dispersed amongst the nations, as it says in the that we should, to break our haughtiness, that we should repent and serve God properly. So we are living amongst the nations, and are warned 3 oaths: not to return en masse. Secondly, to be loyal citizens in every country, not to rebel against any nation. And we have to pray for the well-being of the countries that host us. And thirdly, we're not to make any attempt to end exile. Now, so we for 2,000 years we went through the Inquisition. Sephardic communities know that very well.
Right.
We went through the Crusades. We went through many sufferings, many trials and tribulations, where Jews gave their lives not to leave their religion, to uphold their religion. They were burnt at the stake. They were driven out of their lands. And all why? Because we are Jews, and that's what it means to be, that we are connected to God. We are made this covenant with God. Now, we had the opportunity in these 2,000 years to create our own Jewish homeland. I mean, there was the golden age of Judaism. There were many times that Jews asked their leading rabbis, Maimonides, Ramban, many of the others, they asked them, should we maybe try to buy a piece of land and create our own state? And always the response was that, have patience. God is all compassionate. God sees everything. He rules the world. And it's his will that we should be dispersed amongst the nations. And we are under oath. We are not to attempt to by ourselves rebuild, reinstitute a Jewish nationalism, because it's the decree of exile. God wants to break our haughtiness, and God has another purpose. Rabbi Shamshin before Hirsch explains that while we're dispersed amongst the nations, we will be a light unto the nations. Ideally, when we're serving God properly, so we are holy people, we are good people, and we people of charity, and we will teach people, it will be a light unto the nations of how to serve God. So it serves the dual purpose of our being dispersed amongst the nations, to break our haughtiness, that we should repent and return to the service of God, and that we should be a light unto the nations when we're ideally serving God. And then ultimately, God, with his compassion, when he feels that it is fit, the proper time, then he will take us and return us to the Holy Land, as a nation. And the Almighty, at that time himself, without any human intervention, will rebuild the temple, and all the nations will serve God in harmony. Not all the nations will become Jewish. Not that. That's not the way it will be. But all the nations together will believe in one God and serve God in harmony and peace. Prior to that happening, this metaphysical change in the world, to the Almighty's ending of the exile, we are to remain amongst the nations as loyal citizens and never make this attempt to return en masse or to rebel against the nations. Zionism came along by these people who were totally estranged from God, because they had a history. Remember, this Zionism started in Europe, and like 100 years prior to Zionism, there was a movement called Reform Judaism, where it was some heretic, Moses Mendelssohn, his name should be obliterated. He was a learned person, but he was a rotten apple, and he came along. He was a heretic, and he believed that he said, "Oh, the Torah was not given by God, and Moses took the Torah." Although we never had a gap in our religion, and we were over 1 million people who saw how God gave Moses the Torah, and we were all lived it. There was never a gap, that there was a space, and so to say that somebody invented something, it was passed down for these million people, of over 1 million people, from generation to generation. So it's solid rock truth that we're people of the book. Everything was written. We know, we were heard, and our parents and saw how God revealed himself to the Jewish nation and gave us the Torah, and we accepted the Torah. But this guy came along and said that Moses created the Torah, and therefore you can pick and choose what you want in this Jewish religion.
Right.
So they decided to reform Judaism. That's what reform is. They're going to pick and choose. So they don't keep the Sabbath, the 10 Commandments. They can eat non-kosher. They can, and so forth and so on. But now that's crazy. So that's not Judaism. How dare they? But so yet, and they're truly not a representation of Judaism. But in order to gain their legitimacy, first of all, this is it's just a tangent I'm going over. So what they did was they made a rabbinate or whatever, and they ordained ministers, and they have temples, and they made themselves, so that gave them in the view of the world some legitimacy. And being that they have large numbers, so all of a sudden they became an official representation of Judaism. That's crazy. That's false. The only Judaism is when you are following and not straying from one word from the Torah, which we called Orthodox Judaism. Now, this served for what they wanted to do is assimilate, to be accepted amongst the nations in Europe, because there was much anti-Semitism.
Right.
They figured that they were being scorned and looked down upon. But if they're going to drop their religion and they're going to be dressed like the non-Jewish people, and they can become these cultured Jews of music and doctors and lawyers and so forth and astronomers and then they'll all of a sudden they're going to become accepted. They'll be assimilated. They won't look like Jews. They'll shave their beards. Anyway, and they'll make the temples that are similar to churches. That is what they did. But so they practice assimilation. Now that went on for like 100 years. They bumped along, but many of their children and the grandchildren afterwards, they saw that it's not working. They go to a bar and people will get drunk and they'll say to them, "Hey, you dirty Jew," So they saw it's not working. So they decided, these Zionists, one of the reasons, but actually it was the Satan that was driving them. They decided they're going to, instead of assimilating, what they're going to do is they're going to create their own state. And we're going to be a strong nation. They said we're going to have guns. We're going to have, like I say, all the trappings of a nation. Now, this again is totally, but being that they came mostly from non-religious families, and altogether they were estranged from Judaism, so they totally ignored and didn't reckon with the godly command and the oaths that God said, warned us stringently, that we are expressly forbidden to create our own sovereignty, to try to leave exile. And so all this concept of creating our own state flies in the face of the oaths of exile, it's called. In other words, God had specially gave us a medicine. He took us out of the Holy Land because we were not up to par. He gave us a medicine to break our haughtiness and a responsibility how to be in these nations. Zionism, totally, they laugh at that. They say, "Oh, the reason why we were driven from the land is because we didn't have enough guns. We weren't strong enough."
Right.
So now we're going to create our own state, and we're going to be powerful, and we're going to return to now. Actually, they wanted to create a state in Uganda or Patagonia, near Argentina.
Madagascar,
they
I heard.
A place that would be productive, that would make sense. But then they would be able to create in those times, it was the times of that was what you looked at, was a rich land and so forth. But then they realized, they had a meeting in the 1890s or whatever in the Congress, the Zionist Congress, and they realized that it won't be practical to create that land, their home, their nation, their nationalism in another land except Palestine. Palestine would be the ideal place, because then they can turn to many Jews who are non-religious already, unfortunately, and they'll look at them for support, and they'll explain that, use emotions that we we have anti-Semitism, and we need a land, we need our respect, and we'll make a land. They'll be able to get, and not only that, but in one fell swoop, they'll get the backing of the Christian people also, because they believe that, the Old Testament, it says that the children of Israel have to go to the land of Israel, and so, whatever. So they also, I'm not going to get into to their end of days, where they have the belief of the Gog and Magog, that there'll be
Antichrist.
Armageddon. that and that the Jews will, many of them have the belief that the Jews and the Muslims will go back there to Holy Land and, God forbid, kill each other or accept Christianity. So basically, but they did want to turn to the Christians, and they got the evangelistic Christians, millions and millions of people who support them. So they said, we'll go to Palestine, we'll make our land there. Now, these guys were non-religious, but still, so what are they going to do? But they don't have the morals of the Torah of God. So even though they're conning the people because they're not coming as Judaism, yet they didn't care because they want to. But all they're interested in is reaching their goal. So they said they turned around to the world and they're going to call it the State of Israel. They're going to use the Star of David, and they're going to roll their eyes, and they're going to make a rabbinate. So they make a rabbinate, and they choose a chief rabbi. Yes, it's a rabbi who knows how to learn, but they pick out of the barrel the rotten apple, because the ones who are ready to sell their souls for their cause. And they went and they create a State of Israel, and even ignoring totally the three oaths, ignoring the fact that in the Torah it says, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, that we're going to a land that was, so in other words, beside the fact that we would oppose this creation of a state, if it would be in Patagonia or Uganda, wherever it may be, we would still oppose it because we're in exile. It's a stringent decree of exile. We're forbidden to create 1 inch, 1 centimeter of nationalism of our own nation, because we have to be in the exile that's decreed by God. Until we believe in God, we have to serve God here and wait patiently for His revelation, for His end of exile, for His redemption. Now, but on top of that, being that they're making it in Palestine, so now they're creating it in the land that wasn't it wasn't an uninhabited land. It was a land that existed. The largest community was Muslims, the second largest community was Christians, and then there was a Jewish community. Now, all these three communities, ironically, everyone, even the Jewish community, they all were opposed to create a Jewish state. Right, because the Muslims obviously didn't want to be ruled by the Jews, the Christians either not, and even the Jewish people. These were very religious. The whole community that was living in Palestine was 100%. There was no desecration of the Sabbath. They were all God-fearing community, and they all opposed this concept of transformation into nationalism, and we're not allowed to have this so-called Jewish state, and they oppose this. And now, and on top of that, we have the response. We're not allowed to, like I say, so we're not allowed to. We oppose it because of the decree of exile, and the Jewish people opposed it because you're not allowed to steal or to kill. And also, on top of all that, like I say, the cherry on the cake, except here it's like a bitter pill on top of a mound of toxicity, is the fact that this State of Israel that they want to create, we are required not only not to steal and not to kill and so forth, or harm people, but we are required to show gratitude for good done for us. So though in these 2,000 years, when we went through the Inquisition, the last couple of 100 years, and the Crusades and so forth, and the Jews escaped and they ran the Rambam, Maimonides, and a lot of all these great rabbis, and many of them who lived in Arab and Muslim states, we know that, but many who lived in Spain and so forth, and they had to run away. And they went and they were embraced by the Muslim countries and the Arab and Muslim countries, and we were able to flourish and live our lives as practicing Jews amongst practicing Muslims, even though we had distinctly different religion and how to serve God. But they allowed us, and we were able to give out our greatest rabbis for these hundreds of years without any human rights groups to protect us and so forth. And so, and let's take the Palestine. It was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, yes, and we were able to over there flourish and live as religious Jews, and we lived in the same houses, in the same communities together with Muslims for these hundreds of years, and we were able to coexist in harmony and help each other. So Jews have a responsibility of gratitude for what has been done for them, that we were embraced and given.
In Latin America, for example, many Hispanics that I've spoken to have told me that the Jewish community, they tend to live not only segregated, but they kind of are part of the elite. So it's like when you have a community that does not just necessarily assimilate, but they have like an elitist point of view towards others, that kind of creates resentment. Like especially here, like in the United States, a lot of Hispanics they work for a lot of Jews, and they are used particularly like to do things that halakhically they're not able to do. And I've interviewed many Hispanic people, and they told me that unfortunately they're not seen as equals, and sometimes that kind of creates resentment. And also, I've also seen Hispanophobia within the Jewish community. I've spoken to many people in the community that have told me that Hispanics are descendants of the Crusaders, or descendants of the Inquisitioners, so therefore we have a right to exploit them and use them. And I feel that that's not right, because it's like whatever happened maybe 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Uh, I don't think the descendants need to be punished for what their ancestors did. It's like, just because someone is Hispanic doesn't make them a crusader or an inquisitioner. So
Right.
I just feel that it just kind of creates resentment, and I feel that the secular Jewish community, and also the religious Jewish community, especially here in Los Angeles, they're very egocentric, and they're very far away from reality. They kind of live like in their own world, and I feel, and this is my personal belief, that if the Jewish community and the Hispanic community does not get along, or at least have some type of peace or coexistence, I believe if more of the Hispanic community gets anti-Semitic, believing in blood libel, believing in a lot of conspiracy theories, Hispanics are going to be the majority in the United States within the next couple of years, demographically and everything, because of illegal immigration and legal immigration, also high birth rate. So I feel that if the Jewish community, both the secular and the religious, do not engage within the Hispanic community, there could be persecution among Hispanics of the Jews. And second, I believe that the the conversos, the Ben Anusim, who are descendants of Spanish Jews that were either converted or expelled thousands of years ago, I believe that the religious community, the ones that want to follow Torah Judaism and be religious, I believe they should embrace them, try to, accept them, and the ones that want to be part of the community, I think they should be accepted, because there's a lot of Ben Anusim that I've worked with in the past that want to become religious, and they have faced many barriers because a lot of
Right.
people don't accept them as being Jews, or they don't see them as being equals.
Right. Um, yeah, let me address these issues with God's help. First of all, on my screen, I just see it says Dovid Feldman under my name. My name is Yisroel Dovid Weiss. It's just, I don't know if it could be corrected on your end or something. Well, anyway, but my name is Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss. It says Dovid Feldman under my name there, so that's just wrong. Now, let me. I'm going to want, with God's help, I'm going to address what you just said. But let me just finish, because I gave a whole the preface to what the issue of Zionism first of all. So I
Sure.
just want to just to add a few final points on that. Well, first of all, I have pictures of how Jews used to live together. In peace. Just an example how we used to live together in the Holy Land, as in many other Muslim lands and Arab lands. Our chief rabbis let's say in 1920s, with the Zionists created their state, and they made a rabbinate, just like the Reform did, and they made a chief rabbi, and to give it themselves an air of legitimacy, and that the world looks at their chief rabbi as if he's the chief rabbi of Judaism. But it's a farce, all of this. We have our hundreds of thousands of Jews. They were living there prior to the Zionist state. They weren't they weren't in the hundreds of thousands, because it was the Jewish community was the smallest of the three religions. But they were all very religious and anti-Zionist. Then afterwards, at that time, let's say in the 1920s already, when the Zionists started moving, they were coming up in the 1890s. In that time, they started moving into the Holy Land to create their state. But the chief rabbi at the time from us was Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory, and he met with the king of Transjordan, and he even wrote in the Arab newspapers. I'm just trying to be concise, but there's a lot to speak about in what he wrote, and he said that we're not aspiring to take over the land. We have nothing. We have no will to take what's not ours. And there's more and more pictures of how we lived together and so forth at that time. Then I'm going to skip. This was when 1948. When it was the war of independence of Israel, and one of the great rabbis, that a few great rabbis who were living in the old city, Rabbi Chazan, his name of blessed memory, he was carrying a white flag to give over the Jewish community to the Jordanians, who were the ones who were approaching. And the Zionists warned the Jews that if they're not going to help them, they're going to be killed. And they actually shot Jews. But the Jewish community was actually given over to the Jordanians at the time. And they were actually protected by the Jordanians till after the war, and then the Jordanians gave over the old city, the community, to the other side. And many Jews who lived there, I met many Jews from that. The Jews from that, they always were regretful that they didn't tell the Jordanians and didn't say that we don't want to leave, we want to remain under Jordanian control. But anyway, that's another issue. Now in 1947, a year before the United Nations ratified the State of Israel, that Rabbi Sonnenfeld had passed away, and the new chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky, and he met, and this is he had met with the delegation of the United Nations that came to see what to do in the Holy Land, and they decided to ratify the State of Israel. So the chief rabbi of this community, and this is in the records of the United Nations, he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." This was the declaration for the United Nations on July 16th, 1947, a year before they created this, before the United Nations decided to ratify the State of Israel. Now, after he passed on, then there was the Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum of blessed memory. He's the one who he moved with the title of chief rabbi, moved to New York, to Williamsburg, that I mentioned earlier, and he held court as chief rabbi of Palestine, of Jerusalem, in New York, but he advised and urged many people to leave. So tens of thousands left, that they shouldn't be under the occupation, but hundreds of thousands are still living under the occupation in Palestine. But you have, like I was mentioning, that's in Monroe, you have in New York, in Williamsburg, all the very religious communities, they as well following this chief rabbi and many others who just were following other great rabbis. They all refused to accept the creation of the State of Israel. After he passed away, there was another rabbi. Today, the chief rabbi is Rabbi Dovid Weiss. He should have long and healthy years. And he's the chief rabbi of the community of the Eid HaCharei, this God-fearing community in Jerusalem and around the whole Palestine. And when we took him up as chief rabbi, you can see this is in the streets. You have over 100,000 people. These are tens of thousands in this, just on this area alone. They all went out to greet this chief rabbi. So just get an idea of the hundreds of thousands of Jews who are anti-Zionist, who are living in Palestine. They refuse to accept the occupation in even one, in any manner, shape, or form. This is in Washington, D.C., when Netanyahu came to visit the president, let's say President Obama. This is you see the tens of thousands of Jews coming and demonstrating and stating that Israel has no right to rule over any part of the Holy Land. And this we have in New York, constantly demonstrations in front of the United Nations. Now, when the fact is that in Israel, when they make their demonstrations, we never carry guns. We're not a militant people, as everybody knows. We don't carry guns or anything. Yet every time we demonstrate, this is ongoing from the before the creation of the state till today. You can see the Israelis brutally attack, beat children, young children, by our demonstrations. All we are doing is declaring that we do not accept the state of Israel. Old men, our rabbis get assassinated. This is ongoing. The attacks, the vicious attacks of the Jewish people. You can go to our site NKUSA. You will see this ongoing attacks of the Jewish people. Here you see like pictures, boys and girls who turn 17, they automatically become criminals from the religious community because they refuse to serve in their army. So they can't travel because they didn't serve in the army. They get arrested and so forth. And I could go on and show you all these unbelievable pictures of how Jews are constantly being beaten, and we have demonstrations of tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating they're constantly in the Holy Land, and around the world we stand up against Zionism. There would be much more who would be vocal against Zionism if it wouldn't be for the fear, the brutal attacks of the Zionists against the Jewish community. So what the issue that I'm trying here that you should understand, that Zionism is totally contradictory. It is antithetical, is the diametric opposite of Judaism. Judaism is to serve God. Zionism is a transformation to nationalism. The Jewish people around the world are anti-Zionist, and we cry and we suffer and we hurt and we feel the suffering of the Palestinian people. We are humiliated and embarrassed by what is being done to the Palestinians. Therefore, there are many of us who go out and demonstrate together with the Palestinians by the United Nations and in Washington, D.C. and around the world. But like I say, there are many who are fearful to go up and demonstrate because of the vicious attacks of the Zionists and also of the fear-mongering. The Zionists try to confuse the Jewish people by constantly vilifying the Palestinians, and they say that if they're going to get control, they're going to murder the Jews. So unfortunately, religious Jews fall into this problem of that they're silent because they don't know what to do. And then some people unfortunately support the Zionists, so they get ensnared into Zionism by believing that the Zionist propaganda, that where they try to incorporate the religion, they say, oh, God gave us the land and it's ours, totally ignoring that we're in exile and forbidden to have the land, and that all the around the world, the greatest amount of religious rabbis, like we put out a book, the Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of the major rabbis from around the world, from Sephardic, Ashkenazic, all of them spoke out in one voice, in all according to their style, against having a state of Israel and against Zionism. Okay, that said, so therefore, around the world, unfortunately, though, people equate Judaism and Zionism, and therefore, like I say, they're angry at Jews because they look at them as both elitist, as you mentioned, and that we want control, and we want to have the Holy Land. We want control of the people, and all the Muslim people around the world that consider themselves brothers with Muslims in Palestine. So they are very angry at the Jewish people, and all. So this cause of exacerbating anti-Semitism is Zionism. Now you started speaking about another concept entirely, not entirely another concept, but that living in California or whatever it may be, and you have a lot of Hispanic people.
Right.
So let's just leave this issue that that people have a given that Jewish people are unfortunately, that they have the Jewish people have this militant, or that they want to control other people. But you have an issue that there is unfortunately something that really people cannot be blamed. It's the human nature. If people are successful, that a lot of times people will be envious of them. Now, a lot of times it could be remedied, or it could be really, it shouldn't. The people who are very successful.
Hello.
Doesn't mean they should look down on other people. It was simply a blessing of God. But a lot of times people, it's a nature that people are envious and so forth. Now, it doesn't, and it could be that, like I say, that some of these well-off people are responsible because they're not treating the other people with the fullest respect that they should. But a lot of times it's really, responsible for what's happening in that issue. But there's much to do in that state. So therefore, like the Hispanic communities, maybe because the Jewish people, they insulate themselves a lot because by the religious communities, at least, because we insulate ourselves, not because we're looking down at people. It's simply because we have we are it is critical for us, and we are very fearful that it's like a person who's not in the best of health or whatever. He goes to a hospital, and so his body is very sensitive, and they make sure they put up signs outside the rooms that nobody should go in who has any type of a cold even or something, that they shouldn't, because the body is very weak. So we look at Judaism as just giving like a metaphor in that. So as we are very fearful that God forbid, we went through Hitler, we went through so much suffering, and and we lost our leaders and so forth, that we are very fearful that we shouldn't lose our youth, we shouldn't be affected by all the different things that are happening outside of the Jewish community. So we insulate ourselves, that we should be able to the proper education, the proper Jewish lifestyle that we want our communities to be in, our children to grow up in, and that they shouldn't be affected by all this immorality and all these other things. So the insulating is not because we are looking down upon other people, it's because simply we want to save this critically I don't want to say sick, but the critically this patient that we just barely survived in Europe. Our leaders were murdered, so we have, and it's all together, it's in our history, that we try to live insulated, that we should be able to strengthen, and that we should have a strong Jewish believing in the Torah and serving God properly. So that's why we have our insulated communities. Now, again, we do not look down upon other people. That's not the issue. But people look down, they feel that wrongly, incorrectly, that we are looking down upon these other people. It's simply we're trying to live our lives. Now, it's people, of course, taking people to work for them, and like people who are a lot of times who are coming in who do not have an education and so forth. So they usually take the low-end jobs,
right?
Like cleaning the houses and things like that. So that's a fact of life. That's the way people. They're thankful that they're able to get some type of work. And so Jewish people obviously have to have the house. We have also, like you said, we have large families. We have to have people to clean the house also, just like everybody does. And so it's natural that we should take in people, and a lot of them people who come from the Spanish community, because they're coming in and they didn't have the education and so forth, so they're looking for any type of job they can get. So it may bring to this feeling, that we look down upon them, but it's really not true. It's just a simple, way, the way of life that, if you find that they have these jobs in other houses,
right?
They may feel looked down upon, but it's really nothing to do with that. Of course, it has to do each individual, how you treat. I know that we treat with the greatest respect. In my house, it's hard. My wife should live 120, be and healthy and so forth. It's she doesn't have the power to. We have people coming to clean in our house, and we treat them with the greatest respect and pay them according to the proper and amount, and we give food to eat and to make sure that they're properly treated and so forth. And I know all the people in my community, everybody acts properly, because it's what godliness requires of us, that we should treat everybody with respect. And every boss, any person who has a business has workers, and obviously everybody would like to be the owner of the store and not to work for the other, but that's the way of God made it, that people will work for other people, and that's the way it is.
And
Now,
and I
as far as Morocco, Yeah, I
and
just
I
like to touch on the
sure.
other issue. Let me just touch on the third point. So it's really the Zionism creates like a bad feeling, like exacerbates anti-Semitism because of that what they're doing. But that has nothing to do with Judaism and has nothing to do with Jewish people. Unfortunately, some people are a lot who get ensnared in Zionism, but the ones who are true to Judaism do not accept it. So shouldn't be held responsible, and we want the world to understand that we not only we shouldn't be held responsible, we are totally in opposition and try to do what we can to help support and help the Palestinian people in their quest for their freedom. That's in regard to that. In regard to the other issues, of course, we have to always encourage and teach our children the proper way of the Torah, to give everybody respect and to treat everybody with the greatest respect and so forth. Now, in regard to the third issue, the other issue that you've mentioned about Jewish people should accept, the people of the Sephardic communities, and also that you said another issue, that we should not want to treat badly people of Spain because of what happened 1,000 years ago.
Exactly.
Of course, Judaism, again, it's that, you see, that's the basics. Zionism tells us that you're a Jew because you were born a Jew, and it doesn't require us to follow the laws of the Torah. But if somebody would follow the ethics and the teachings of the Torah and the laws of the Torah, they would understand, they would, of course, not for 1 minute want to take revenge or do something to the people of who comes from Spain, or something like that. It's totally against our religion. It doesn't say anywhere such a concept. Of course, we say that we pray to the Almighty and we say that God should avenge the blood of the ones who are, murdered and tortured, so but we leave that to God, and there's nothing to do. We're not talking about who God deems responsible, who's not responsible, and so what does it have to do now today with it has nothing to do with our living together with our people of Spain and so forth. So on the contrary, if we would have Spanish neighbors here, we would, of course, whoever our neighbors happen to be, if they're from Spain or any of these countries, or from that origin, we give them the greatest respect, and we treat it with the greatest respect, and help each other and so forth. So that's really totally wrong, and it's a wrong belief. If there anybody who does that, it's because they're lacking in their Judaism. It's not because they're Jewish. It's because they're lacking in their in practicing the Jewish religion.
Yeah, because one thing that, Rabbi, one thing that I've seen with many people in the Jewish community, regardless of their religious or not, is that they forget that before and after, before and during the Holocaust, most of the world was close to Jewish immigration, and there was only like 2 countries in the world that accepted Jewish communities. One was Cuba, and the other one was Dominican Republic. And many of these Jews went to Cuba and to Dominican Republic, and they were accepted and they were given land. And I feel that many of the people today, as memory goes, they forget. And I just feel that I don't see the appreciation that I think many of the Jewish community should have towards Latin America. It's like many Latin American countries took in many Jews without prejudice, without discrimination, and they did a lot for the Jewish community. So when Hispanics come here to the United States, regardless of being persecuted or because of political issues, they feel that they get mistreated here, especially from established Jewish communities. Like I've spoken with many Hispanics that have told me that they just hear a lot of things that are not right, and I feel that Hispanophobia is a major issue in the Jewish community. I feel that it needs to be addressed because the same way the Jewish community wants to address anti-Semitism within the Hispanic community, I feel Hispanophobia needs to be addressed as well, because it's something that is real, it's relevant, and I feel that in order to have better harmony and better working communication, I feel that these things need to be addressed. They cannot be pushed over the carpet. So one thing that I do with my organization is to educate people on Hispanophobia, to educate about issues relating to, racism, from other groups towards the Hispanic community, and also to advocate for, Hispanic inclusiveness within the wider American society. So I feel that
That's
having these important
yeah.
conversations are very important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But I could just say again that in our religious communities, in our schools, there is no such concept of of racism or so anything like that. And they definitely, if what we have people from Hispanic communities, we have people from Latin America, South America. We have, the majority of our communities are Ashkenazic in our communities here, but still in all, we do have a minority. We have people from all these different communities, and God forbid if a child would come home, and we would hear in the school that that somebody made fun of another person or didn't treat them properly, or it's just unacceptable. It's because I gotta say, the Torah does not accept such a thing, does not teach racism or anything of that nature. There's no such thing that's a difference from where you're coming, what country, what color of skin, or anything like that. So it's totally unacceptable, and it wouldn't happen. I mean, like I say, if some child we would hear such a thing, he would immediately be reprimanded and taught to correct their ways. It doesn't happen in our community. It's not an acceptable thing. I'm not saying that as individuals you won't find here and there, God forbid, that people don't do what the Torah requires of us, but as a community, there is no such thing as discrimination in our synagogues, in our in our communities. That's for a fact. But I'm talking about the religious communities that are true to the Torah. I can't speak for other communities, but I may even attempt to say that that even it's quite unfortunate, but I know as a general rule in the Jewish communities, like you'll go to hospitals, you'll go to many places, you'll find many plaques talking about how Jews, and I've heard it from even from Arabs and Muslims, that the Jewish people are very well known for their charitable deeds, and they do a lot of good, except when it comes to the issue of Palestine occupation. That's why they always puzzle. How come here it stops? But the Jewish people, it's still in their bones that they are supposed to do charity and be kind. So a lot of times, again, I'm not saying that there is no exception to the case, but a lot of times even the concept of discrimination, and that it's I think even in the Jewish communities that unfortunately are not following the Torah properly, a lot of them still and all, they wouldn't want to be discriminating and bad to other people. On the contrary, a lot of people that do charitable works. I mean, in the times of when discrimination against blacks was many Jews who were involved. To help the black people, and were murdered for that also in the South here in the United States, and so on. The Jewish people are always, I think, it's ingrained in them to do good and to have compassion for others. But like I say, in the religious community, it's the Torah, because it's godly, and just now it's one of the verses says, "Mahu racham afata terach." Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate. And in the Talmud, it speaks about stories like one person said to whatever mentioned, they said, you said to another person, like you're very not pretty, put it that way. And so he said, why are you turning to me? Turn to my creator. So the Torah, in other words, the Torah teaches us that there's no such thing as, you should discriminate, or you should make fun of somebody, all that. That's totally, forbidden and unacceptable in the Torah. About the Marranos, I mean, again, if we were very stringent about that, we have to genealogy when it comes to marriage and things like that. The person. So if we're not certain of a person's genealogy, so that sometimes they have to go through a conversion. But we totally accept in our communities, if somebody wants to convert to Judaism and so forth, or if they're from Moranos, if they can't find the proper lineage, so they have to go through a conversion, but they definitely accept it and embraced and taken in. And I'm witness to that constantly. Now in the Sephardic communities, I know that the Syrian community, they had issue. And again, I'm not condoning this, but they made like some ban against accepting converts or things like that. And I think it had to do. I'm not 100% certain because I'm not from that community, but it had to do with because being that they were unfortunately very weak after maybe the Second World War, maybe in that time they going from country to country, and they felt that they're going to lose their children or go intermarry with others who were not allowed to. A Jew has to marry a Jew, right. And you're not allowed to marry out of the religion. And there are people who may because they would like a Jewish person, and so they'll make a half conversion, things like that. That's a false conversion. They're just doing it to be able to marry a Jewish person. They don't mean to accept the religion. So maybe the rabbis felt it was a big threat. So they decided to put a ban on the conversions. I don't know halachically if they could do such a thing, because in the Torah, there is the concept of conversion. If somebody wants to convert to Judaism, the law is that we discourage people from converting, because we say that God created everybody. And everybody has to believe that God gave Moses the Torah with the 7 commandments, and everybody has to uphold the 7 commandments of Noah, right? Which is to believe in one God, not to worship idols, not kill, not steal, not commit adultery, and to have a court system in every land, not eat from an animal when it's still shaking, even if it's they slaughter it, whatever. So there's 7 commandments of Noah. If you uphold those commandments, you will inherit the world to come. That's what it says in our law books.
Right.
So you don't have to be Jewish to inherit the world to come. But if you become Jewish, if you convert to Judaism, you must uphold all the 613 commandments. And if you don't, after you converted, you're a full Jew. Once a person converted, he cannot, the second after he does the conversion, he can never release himself from this obligation. Just as somebody who's born from a Jewish mother, right, can be released from his obligation to keep all the laws of the Torah. Now, so therefore, we're afraid that a person may convert, and then afterwards he may find it hard, and he may stop upholding the Torah, and then we've created a sinner. Because if he's not a Jew, he'll serve God properly, or just keeping the 7 commandments. And now all of a sudden we created a sinner. So we discourage people, but we usually, what we do is in our communities, they tell a person to uphold the Torah for like a year or something. And if they still insist that they want to become Jewish, then we do the conversion. If we find that it's for proper reasons. There's also another reason, is because if a person becomes Jewish, he may suffer anti-Semitism. So these 2 reasons, because of the harsh, of the many laws, and because of a person shouldn't suffer anti-Semitism, that we discourage a person. But at the end of the day, if they want to convert, they can convert, and we have converts in our community. Whether the communities that do not accept, if they have a right not to accept, well, first of all, they do accept if you do go to another community and do the conversion in, let's say, in another community. I'm talking not about this Zionist. I'm talking about if you go to a proper Jewish community and they do a proper conversion, then the Syrian community, I know that they will accept them as Jews. It's not that they don't accept them, just they don't want to do the conversion. Like I say, I think they feel threatened that they shouldn't, that the Jews shouldn't, intermarry and things like that with the false conversions.
Well, I really appreciate all of your answers, Rabbi. Thank you very much. We went a little bit over the time, but I think we covered a lot of things. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show. As soon as I'm finished here, I will send you the link, and you could, check out the podcast later on.
Right now, I just again look under my picture the whole time. It says Dovid Feldman. I don't know if you can correct that. It's Yisroel Dovid Weiss.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much for your time, Rabbi. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you, brother.
Bye bye.